Hello and welcome to the Imani Room for the Stream Religion class for this week. This is for 7th and 8th grade. This is the final chapter, chapter 5 of the book we've been looking at for the last couple of weeks. And the title of this chapter is To the Promised Land. Like I've been telling you, the best way to understand Jesus Christ, that we read a lot about in the New Testament, is to understand how he's connected to the Old Testament. And this story of Israel, particularly as they are led by Moses, great prophet, is what in Bible studies we call a foreshadowing or a prefiguring. So Moses is a prefigure. It's like if you want to understand Jesus, look at Moses, because he's a shadow, he's a figure of Jesus. So he leads the people of Israel through the desert. Now, you will know by now that the Israelites are facing a lot of difficulties because the desert is not an easy place to live. And guess what? For us, the experience is living life on this earth. Just like the people of Israel were on a journey through the desert where they were tested and tried, all right? We are also being tested and tried on our journey here on earth. But guess what? It's all going to come to an end somehow. For the people of Israel, their entry into the promised land was like for us, when everything is over here, our entry into heaven, where we'll go and rest with God forever in eternity. The promised land was a land flowing with milk and honey, a land that had fruits as large as you can ever think of. They did not cultivate that, but God gave it to them. He provided that land for them. It's the same thing for us. And guess what? When they entered the land, the promised land, the manna ceased. You remember the manna, the miraculous food that was falling from the heavens? It ceased because they were now home. It's the same thing for us. In a special way for Catholics, we understand that the Eucharist, the body and blood of Christ that we take, is just like the manna that fell. When we make our transition, when we die and we go to heaven, we will see God face to face, and we will no longer need manna. We will no longer need the Eucharist. So whatever trials you're going through right now, I just want you to realize that the difficulties will come to an end. Whether it's COVID-19, coronavirus, whether it's some sickness you're carrying, whatever it is, whether it's some difficulty in your life, in your family, maybe difficulty with your father, difficulty with your mother, difficulty with your friends. Maybe you say, people don't like me. Whatever it is, God loves you. And he has a plan and a purpose for you. He's leading you on a journey. So stand strong. And I speak a lot about a Joshua generation. Guess what? Moses, who led them through the desert, did not even take them into the promised land. Because all the people he brought from Egypt, you remember, in slavery, who complained and gave him a hard time, many of them were prevented from entering the promised land. It was rather Joshua who took over from who? From Moses, and crossed the Jordan River into the promised land. But he took a new generation. And that's what I want to share with you. That many of you as young people, you did not go through the civil rights struggles. Our fathers and our grandparents went through Jim Crow in the South. They struggled. They were beaten. They were chased by dogs and fire hoses and all that. They were discriminated upon. And now they've given us a chance to shine. It's like they've brought us. That's what Dr. Martin Luther King was saying. I may not take you to the promised land, but my eyes have seen the glory of the Lord. So we are a new generation, call it the Joshua generation, who are supposed to take the land that God has already prepared for us. So let's go ahead and complete reading chapter 5 of the book, The Life and the Times of Moses. but the title of this chapter is To the Promised Land. Old habits die hard. Almost as soon as the march began, the Israelites resumed their complaining. This time they were grousing about the food. The constant diet of manna was becoming monotonous. They still had fond memories of full bellies when they lived in Egypt. Meat, fish, cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, and garlic. Soon they had a lot more to complain about. As they approached the promised land, Moses acted prudently, establishing a base camp at the oasis called Kadesh. He sent out a group of spies to provide first-hand reports of what lay ahead of them. They returned after 40 days with good news and bad news. The good news was that the land flowed with milk and honey and fruit. Staggering under their burdens, some of the men brought in ripe grapes, pomegranates, and figs to reveal the richness of the land. The bad news was that the people who already inhabited Canaan, Amalekites, Hittites, Jebusites, and Amorites, in addition to the Canaanites themselves, collectively composed a formidable force. Only two of the spies, Joshua, Moses' eventual successor as leader of the Israelites, and Caleb, urged immediate action. The others recited one horror story after another about the strength of their opponents. Some of them were giants. It would be almost hopeless to go any farther. The Israelites were dismayed. Many cried that they wished they had died in Egypt. Others demanded the right to select new leadership and an immediate return to Egypt. God, once again angered, threatened to destroy the Israelites. Moses again talked him out of it. Still incensed, God thundered that with the exceptions of Caleb and Joshua, the current generation, people aged 20 and over, would never see the promised land because they doubted him. He decreed a proportional punishment, a year in the wilderness for every day the scouts had been gone. That added up to 40 years. Again, there was a rebellion against Moses. 3 men claimed that Moses and his brother Aaron had placed themselves too high. Moses proposed a test. Both sides would burn incense and God would make the decision. Moments later, the earth opened up and swallowed the 3 opponents. At the same time, a fireball destroyed 250 of their supporters who were waiting nearby. The Israelites were outraged. A mob began to form, threatening to attack Moses and Aaron. God sent a plague, threatening a holocaust that will consume the entire population. The 2 leaders intervened, and the plague ended, but not before 15,000 Israelites died, 5 times more than had perished during the episode of the golden calf. This continued a pattern that characterized much of the story of Moses. According to Bruce Feiler, God performs miracles, brings water from the well, rains manna from the heavens, delivers the 10 commandments, and the Israelites react in ungrateful ways. Repeatedly, God threatens to kill them and start over with Moses, as he had with Abraham, as he had with Noah. In each case, God is mollified, though not before exacting a huge price from the Israelites. As is the case in international relations, the only way to stop a downward spiral is with enlightened leadership, and Moses, even in his most trying times, emerges as an enlightened leader. Specifically, what Moses realizes is that God and Israel need each other, and that it's his role to make sure that happens, to play peacemaker. Time and again, throughout the rebellions, Moses pleads with God to forgive the people, then turns around and pleads with the people not to be so hard-headed toward God. In other words, Moses was a negotiator, and a very good one at that. He needed to keep the people together in their 40 years of isolation. But he failed at one crucial moment. It would cost him dearly. The Bible tells us virtually nothing of what happened during those years in the wilderness. The Israelites may have spent most of the time at Kadesh. Their large numbers threatened to exhaust the fresh water at the oasis. God instructed Moses to speak to a nearby rock, which would then produce sufficient water. Moses to speak to a nearby rock, which would then produce sufficient water. Moses walked over to the rock, struck it with his staff, the same method he had used soon after the Israelites had arrived in the desert following their flight from Egypt. That was a mistake. He hadn't precisely followed God's instructions. He had struck the rock rather than speaking to it. Retribution was immediate. You will not bring this community into the land I give them, God said. Numbers chapter 20, verse 12. The Bible is silent about the way in which Moses received this harsh edict. It must have been crushing to his spirit. Again, the blow of a wooden staff upon a rock, dry rock, a lifetime of struggle, hardship, and faithful service counted for nothing in the eyes of God, writes Jonathan Kirsch. Moses knew that he wouldn't enter the promised land, but it was still his duty to lead the Israelites there. When the period of punishment ordained by God was over, it was time to make plans. These plans took advantage of what had happened during the past 40 years. As Fowler explains, the desert is a cauldron where the Israelites must coalesce. The desert not only cleanses, it constructs, because the place is demanding. It builds character. Because it's destructive, it builds interdependence. Because it's isolating, it builds community. Because it's the desert, it builds nations. The Israelites had truly come together as a people. The path to the promised land was still blocked to approaches from the south. Therefore, Moses decided on an end round. In other words, the Israelites would try to make their entrance from the opposite direction. They set out northbound, but quickly ran into opposition. The kingdom of Edom refused to let them pass. Moses swung eastward, skirting the Edomites. Then he headed north again, toughened by their years in the wilderness. The Israelites overcame the Amorites, the kingdom of Moab. The final stop before the promised land lay just ahead. Panic-stricken, the Moabite king asked a sorcerer named Balaam to lay a curse on his new and unwelcome neighbors. Instead, inspired by God, Balaam issued a blessing for the intruders who swept into Moab and made camp near the Jordan River. The promised land was on the other side. It was time for Moses to speak to the people he had led so long and so far for the final time. As Jonathan Kirsch writes, the saga that began on the banks of the Nile came to an end on the banks of the Jordan. The Israelites were no longer the ragged band of runaway slaves whom Moses had led out of Egypt so many years before. The slave generation was dead and gone, and their children had proved themselves to be a generation of warriors, tough and ruthless. As Moses spoke his last words to the nation of Israel, the disciplined ranks of battle-hardened soldiers gathered before him were ready for the command that would send them across the Jordan River at last. Moses was now destined to make that crossing. He ascended to the top of Mount Nebo, where God showed him the land that his followers were about to claim. Then he died. Bruce Feiler writes, "It seems impossibly sad that Moses could lead the Israelites out of Egypt, direct them for 40 years in the desert, beat back their many rebellions, only to be stopped just inches from the promised land." But the first 5 books of the Old Testament, also known as the Torah, the Pentateuch, and the 5 books of Moses, do not end in tragedy. It ends with praise of Moses. Since then, no prophet has risen in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face, who did all those miraculous signs and wonders the Lord sent him to do in Egypt. To Pharaoh and to all his officials and to his whole land, for no one has ever shown the mighty power or performed the awesome deeds that Moses did in the sight of all Israel. Deuteronomy chapter 34, verse 10 to 12. Today, the covenant remains, though Judaism has less than 14 million adherents around the world. There are an estimated 1.9 billion Christians and more than 1 billion Muslims. It exerts a force far beyond mere numbers. Judaism led directly to Christianity, and many of its prophets are accepted as important elements of the religion of Islam, including Moses, whose Arabic name is Musa. His name appears 136 times in the Quran, and the most of any prophet in the Islamic holy book. Moses was without doubt the most powerful genius brought forth by Israel, concludes author Elias Auerbach. In order to achieve what he did, he possessed a variety of talents, which in their abundance and breadth have rarely been concentrated in a single man. He had to have all the ability of a statesman and army commander. He had to be able to assume the leadership of a people and to deal with the pressing dangers of every hour. He needed infallible judgment and the ability to make prompt decisions. He had to provide food and water. He had to give guidance and on the way and provide security. He traveled that route with unerring certainty for 40 years, day by day and year by year, until his work was crowned with success. Such success that the coming generations felt themselves to be the heirs and successors of his course. With all the detail, and in small things lies the truly great. He remained the prophetic visionary who conceived the final accomplishment and its continuance in a hostile world. Okay, so that comes to the end of the reading. I want you to take a look at the Bible as History, FYI, for your info. And just to mention again and again, so whenever Jesus would speak, remember he would speak about him, the God God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. All right? And all this has a lot to do with the history, just like we as an African American people have a history. Okay? So we stand on the shoulders of those who have gone before us, who struggled. For peace sake, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was shot. He was only 39 years old. He gave his life for us. Okay? So we are supposed to be like the Joshua generation taking the promised land. Okay? A lot of promises that were made for us. So let's go for it. And I hope you are able to complete this work safely and turn in your homework to me. God bless you.